few years ago, I was having a conversation with someone and they were telling me about a book they were reading. It was titled The Most Dangerous Prayer. The prayer had four parts. I don't remember what all of them were, but I do remember the first part for sure. And the first part was, "Search me, O God." That's a bit of a strange thing to ask for, isn't it? Because what do we mean? What are we actually asking for when we ask God to search us? Well, we can't be saying that we're giving him permission because he's our creator. He has full access to our innermost thoughts and desires, and there's nothing we could do to prevent him that right. We also shouldn't be saying that he's going to learn something about us because he's all-knowing. He already knows everything about us. So what are we saying? Is this a useless prayer? Are we not really saying anything meaningful at all? Is it just bad theology? Well, that can't be right either, because Psalm 139 actually contains this exact prayer. "Search me, O Lord, and know my heart." So what are we asking? What is this prayer? I'm sure there's lots of very intelligent answers to this, many of which I'm sure I'm not aware of, but I had a thought that I think is related to this, and I thought it was interesting, so I want to talk about that. It's certainly true that there's nothing God could learn about us by searching us. God already perfectly knows us inside and out. He knows our deepest thoughts and desires. In fact, he knows us better than we know ourselves. But maybe that's the point. Maybe the point is that we don't actually know ourselves well enough. That is a serious question we should all consider. How well do we know ourselves? Because if we're being honest, I think we're going to come to the conclusion that we don't know ourselves, or at least not nearly as well as we wish we did. Turns out people are complicated, and that includes us. We have all sorts of fears and insecurities and hidden motivations that are buried so deeply within us that it's hard for us to see them, let alone recognize that they're even there to begin with. I know I've experienced this. I've had tons of times in my life where something just frustrated me beyond belief. And when I thought about the thing, I realized it was trivial and it shouldn't frustrate me. It really didn't matter all that much. But even realizing that didn't help the frustration. There was something inside me that was reacting to it, and I couldn't figure out what it was. There's been a lot of other times where I've been confronted by others about my motivations for doing something and how maybe they're not as pure as I'm letting on. And the first reaction, which I think is fairly natural, is offense. How dare you think you know me better than I know myself? And yet, many times as I've considered those accusations, I found out that the person's right. And the more alarming thing is that I didn't know they were right before they pointed it out. In other words, I had this motivation for the thing I was doing that I didn't know about, and that somebody else needed to point out to me. I have a feeling I'm not particularly unique, and that this is probably a more general struggle that people have. And that's interesting in its own right, maybe cause for discussion another time. But practically, it turns out that this mysterious self that eludes us creates real, tangible problems in our lives. In the Christian life in particular, as we're trying to live virtuous lives, it creates a plethora of moral hazards. Because in order for any act we do to be morally just, we need to do the right thing for the right reason. In other words, what we do matters just as much as why we do it. And if there's a defect in either of those two things, then what we're doing actually isn't virtuous at all. To give an example, giving money to the poor in and of itself is a good thing to do. But your motivation matters, because if you're doing it for the sake of the poor person, to lift them up and help them in their difficult situation, then that's a virtuous act of charity. On the other hand, if the only reason you're doing it is to gain prestige for yourself, to be seen as this great person by others around you, then that's an act of pride, which is a very serious and deadly sin. And so if we can't answer that question, why am I doing what I'm doing? There's this terrifying reality that we could be sinning, we could be acting outside of virtue or unjustly without even realizing it. And without a solution to that problem, we're almost certainly going to find ourselves caught in a spiral of doubt and distrust for our own actions and motivations. And the fear that ensues from that could very easily cause us to stop striving for the good altogether, which is a sin, or just to opt for the bland safety of inaction, which, again, apart from being a sin, is just no way to live. So what do we do then? Well, the good news is we don't have to rely only on ourselves. God's given us two incredible resources to combat this mysterious self that we find. The first is our loved ones, those around us. Because within the intimacy of very close friendships, people have this unique opportunity to see someone and to know them without all that internal baggage clouding their judgment. And because of this, oftentimes, I know I've found, I'm sure most people have found, that our loved ones sometimes know us better than we know ourselves. I've seen this play out numerous times in my marriage with my wife. I can't tell you the number of times I've spent hours in self-reflection and contemplation trying to work through this issue I'm having, and suddenly coming upon this realization, this brilliant insight about myself, and then going to my wife and telling her I finally figured out why I've been doing this. And like 9 times out of 10, her reaction is, "You didn't know that? Oh, I could have told you that." And that's a humbling thing, because this thing that took so much work to figure out, she saw so simply in me. And luckily, I've been able to be on the other side of that. I've been able to provide her with these insights, especially when she's dealing with intense anxieties that she can't figure out. And I've been able to rationalize it and find the roots for her. And that's a wonderful thing. The second thing God has given us is his own help. He himself can search us and help us. And I think that relates to this prayer. When we ask God, "Search me and know my heart," we obviously aren't giving him permission or inviting him in to learn something about us. But we could be begging him to reveal the deep mysteries of ourselves to ourselves. Yeah, God already knows everything about you, but you don't. So asking him for his help makes a whole lot of sense. And going back to Psalm 139, the source for this, the surrounding verses make a lot of sense of that. The whole beginning is about God's all-knowingness, and the last few verses, I think, perfectly illustrate what we're asking for when we ask God to search us. It says, "Test me and know my anxious thoughts. See if there is any offensive way in me, and lead me in the way everlasting." There's a strong emphasis on things being uncovered, things that we struggle with, our anxious thoughts, our offensive ways. And the resolution is to help us overcome them, to lead us in the way everlasting. I think that makes sense of this prayer. It's a request for God to reveal the mysteries of ourselves. And it's a request for him to help us past them. And if that's what it is, then that certainly is a dangerous prayer, because being examined is never particularly fun. And there's a danger in not knowing what could be uncovered to you. And whatever filth is revealed, it's probably going to hurt to have that shown to you. And yet, it's such a good prayer, and it's necessary for the Christian life. Because we can't deal with issues that we don't know that we have. If you don't know what your baggage is, you can't let go of it. This isn't to say that God's going to show us what's wrong with us and then we take it from there. No, he's going to show us what's wrong with us, and then we're going to have to fall down at his feet all over again and beg him to help us get rid of it, which of course he will, because he's good and he loves us. But the point is that you can't let go of something that you don't know you're holding on to. And there's a lot of things we don't know we're holding on to. If we want to unburden ourselves, if we want to go to God and humbly ask him to heal us of our sickness, we need to know what we're offering up to him. The grace of this prayer then is that even in our weakness, even in the depths that we find ourselves, that we don't even know ourselves, we're offered help through that. Search me, O God, not that you're going to find anything you don't already know about me, but that you might reveal me to myself and help me past the burdens that are hurting me. That's a beautiful prayer. It's one every Christian should be repeating every single day.